In a Boston courtroom last Tuesday, what started as a routine case involving Hollywood star Hugh Jackman quickly became the talk of the legal world. As Jackman stood before Judge William Harrison, few could have predicted how dramatically the power dynamic would shift in those tense hours. The acclaimed actor, known worldwide for his roles as Wolverine and in countless award-winning films, found himself facing a judge who clearly didn't believe celebrity status deserved special treatment. Where are you watching from today? Your location might have different laws than what played out in this unprecedented courtroom showdown. The grand marble courthouse had stood for over a century, its imposing columns and ornate woodwork creating an atmosphere of gravitas and tradition. The morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor as attorneys, clerks, and curious onlookers filled the gallery. Despite the building's grandeur, there was something distinctly cold about Courtroom 7, where Judge William Harrison had earned his reputation as the Hammer, a no-nonsense adjudicator with little patience for fame or fortune. Hugh Jackman entered without the entourage one might expect from a Hollywood A-lister. Dressed in a simple charcoal suit, he moved with quiet confidence, his expression serious but composed. Those who noticed him entering did double takes, whispering behind cupped hands. Was that really the Hugh Jackman? What was he doing in a Boston courthouse on an ordinary Tuesday morning? The actor took his seat beside his attorney, a young woman whose reputation in environmental law was beginning to make waves, though she remained relatively unknown in celebrity circles. Judge Harrison entered, and the bailiff called for all to rise. The judge settled into his high-backed leather chair, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the docket. When his eyes landed on Jackman's name, a visible smirk crossed his face. The smirk didn't go unnoticed by those in the front row, and the tension in the room immediately thickened. Case number 47,293, Commonwealth versus Jackman, the clerk announced. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his steely gaze fixed on the actor. Mr. Jackman, I understand you're contesting the cease and desist order regarding your foundation's construction project on Riverpoint Drive? Yes, Your Honor, Jackman replied, standing respectfully. The judge's smirk widened into something more like a sneer. Hollywood comes to Boston. How refreshing. The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. I've read your filing, Mr. Jackman, and I must say it's quite entertaining, almost as entertaining as one of your movies. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's sharp glance. Jackman remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged, despite the clear disrespect. Your Honor, Jackman's attorney began, the Laughing Kookaburra Foundation has followed every environmental regulation and— Ms. Chen, the judge interrupted, I'm well aware of the claims. What I find interesting is how celebrities think they can waltz into my courtroom with their pet projects and expect different treatment. He turned his attention back to Jackman. Tell me, Mr. Jackman, do you have any actual legal training, or did you just have your PR team draft this response? The courtroom fell silent. Jackman's attorney tensed visibly, but before she could respond, Jackman placed a gentle hand on her arm. Your Honor, with all due respect, Jackman began, his Australian accent more pronounced than usual. I understand your skepticism, but this isn't about celebrity. It's about 27 children who need a safe place to recover from cancer treatments. Judge Harrison waved his hand dismissively. Save the emotional appeals for your interviews, Mr. Jackman. This is a court of law. What the judge didn't realize was that Hugh Jackman hadn't come unprepared. Behind his composed exterior was months of intensive study and preparation. The Laughing Kookaburra Foundation, named after Australia's famous bird, had become Jackman's passion project after losing a close friend to cancer 3 years earlier. The foundation specialized in creating healing environments for children undergoing cancer treatment, places where nature, architecture, and medical care intersected. The Riverpoint Drive project had hit a snag when a local developer claimed the construction violated obscure zoning laws. What seemed like a simple misunderstanding had escalated when Judge Harrison, known for his ties to old Boston real estate families, fast-tracked the case and issued a temporary cease and desist order. Your Honor, Jackman continued, unshaken by the judge's dismissive attitude, if I may direct the court's attention to Exhibit C in our filing. The judge flipped through the papers before him with obvious reluctance. Go on. The regulation cited by the plaintiff, Boston Municipal Code section. What happened next began to shift the atmosphere in the courtroom. Jackman, without notes or prompting from his attorney, proceeded to cite specific legal precedents, dates, case numbers, and technical details of Boston's complex zoning regulations. His delivery wasn't that of an actor reciting memorized lines, but of someone who thoroughly understood the material. Judge Harrison's smirk began to fade as Jackman methodically addressed each point of the opposition's claim. The actor referenced a 1987 Massachusetts Supreme Court ruling that had created an exception for medical facilities serving children, then connected it to 3 subsequent cases that had expanded the definition of what constituted a therapeutic environment. Furthermore, Your Honor, Jackman continued, his voice steady and authoritative, the plaintiff's reliance on Westbrook v. City of Boston fundamentally misinterprets Justice Callahan's opinion. If I may quote directly from page 47 of that decision, the judge's expression had transformed from mocking to confused, then to something approaching respect. The gallery watched in fascination as Hollywood royalty demonstrated legal acumen that most practicing attorneys would envy. Jackman's attorney, Ms. Chen, sat beside him with a small, knowing smile. She had known what was coming. This wasn't a case of a celebrity figurehead letting the lawyers do the talking. Judge Harrison cleared his throat, interrupting Jackman mid-citation. Mr. Jackman, I'm curious, where exactly did you acquire this knowledge of Massachusetts property law? A hush fell over the courtroom as everyone leaned forward slightly, eager to hear the response. The power dynamic had shifted palpably, and even the court reporter paused, fingers hovering above her keyboard. Jackman smiled slightly, not the dazzling Hollywood smile from red carpets, but something more subdued and genuine. Your Honor, when something matters to you, you make the time to understand it properly. These children matter to me. The simple statement hung in the air, more powerful than any emotional plea or dramatic performance could have been. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, a reluctant acknowledgement of something he hadn't expected to find in his courtroom that morning, authentic commitment backed by genuine expertise. Proceed, Mr. Jackman, the judge said, his tone noticeably different. I believe you were explaining the relevance of the Callahan opinion. The courtroom atmosphere shifted as Jackman continued his legal analysis. What had begun as a judge's condescension toward a celebrity was evolving into an unexpected battle of minds. Jackman walked to the projector screen, having received permission from the now attentive Judge Harrison. The actor pulled up architectural renderings of the Laughing Kookaburra Foundation's Healing Center, a beautiful facility designed to blend seamlessly with the natural environment while providing cutting-edge therapeutic spaces for children battling cancer. As you can see, Your Honor, the property falls within what's known as a transitional zone under Boston Municipal Code section 714.3, Jackman explained, laser pointer circling an area on the map. The plaintiff, Westland Development Corporation, claims this prohibits medical facilities. However, their interpretation fails to account for the 2017 amendments to the code. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his earlier smirk now replaced with undisguised curiosity. The 2017 amendments? Refresh my memory, Mr. Jackman. Certainly, Your Honor, Jackman replied, pulling up another document with remarkable efficiency. Following the Brenner Children's Hospital case, the City Council amended the code to include specific provisions for pediatric care facilities that incorporate healing gardens and natural elements. If you'll direct your attention to subsection F, paragraph 3. The opposing counsel, a senior partner from one of Boston's oldest law firms, rose to object. Your Honor, with all due respect, Mr. Jackman is not a licensed attorney and should not be permitted to argue points of law. Judge Harrison considered this for a moment, then shook his head. Mr. Thornton, while Mr. Jackman is indeed not a member of the bar, he is appearing alongside qualified counsel and is entitled to address the court regarding his foundation's project. I'll allow it. He turned back to Jackman. Please continue. The rebuke silenced the opposing counsel, who sank back into his chair with visible discomfort. Meanwhile, the gallery had grown, with court staff finding excuses to enter the courtroom. Word had spread through the courthouse that Hugh Jackman was delivering a masterclass in municipal law. Thank you, Your Honor, Jackman continued. The 2017 amendments created what's known as a therapeutic use exception, specifically addressing facilities where medical care intersects with nature-based healing. Our project meets every criterion outlined in the statute. What made Jackman's presentation so compelling wasn't just his knowledge of the law, but his passionate yet measured delivery. He wasn't performing. He was advocating with the conviction of someone deeply invested in the cause. As he continued, he revealed the personal connection that had led him to create the foundation, the loss of his childhood friend to cancer, and his promise to create places where healing could happen holistically. Judge Harrison, whose reputation for strictness was courthouse legend, found himself nodding along as Jackman methodically dismantled the opposition's case. The actor presented evidence that Westland Development's objections coincided suspiciously with their failed attempt to purchase the same property for luxury condominiums 6 months earlier. "This isn't speculation, Your Honor," Jackman explained, presenting emails obtained through discovery. "These communications clearly show that Westland's CEO, Mr. Richard Thornton, who happens to be opposing counsel's brother, expressed frustration that our foundation outbid them for the property, stating, and I quote, 'We'll find another way to get that land.'" A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed as he examined the evidence. "Mr. Thornton, is this accurate?" The opposing counsel stood uncomfortably. "Your Honor, my client's prior interest in the property is irrelevant to the zoning issue at hand." "I'll determine what's relevant in my courtroom," Judge Harrison replied sharply. The judge was clearly reassessing not just Jackman, but the entire case before him. Jackman pressed his advantage, producing affidavits from leading pediatric oncologists detailing how the planned facility's unique design, incorporating natural light, healing gardens, and views of the Boston Harbor, would significantly benefit childhood cancer patients' recovery outcomes. Studies show that children who recover in environments with natural elements experience 23% faster recovery times and require 17% less pain medication, Jackman explained, citing research from Harvard Medical School. "This isn't just about building a pretty facility, Your Honor. It's about giving these children their best chance at recovery." As the morning wore on, what had started as a routine hearing had turned into something extraordinary. Jackman's command of legal precedent, zoning regulations, and medical research was undeniable. The judge, who had initially dismissed him as just another celebrity with a vanity project, was now engaged in thoughtful legal dialogue with the actor. During a brief recess, reporters gathered outside the courtroom, the story already spreading across social media. "Hugh Jackman stuns Boston court with legal brilliance," read one headline. Inside, Jackman conferred quietly with his attorney, Ms. Chen, reviewing additional materials they might need to present. When court resumed, Judge Harrison addressed the room with a notably different demeanor than he had displayed earlier. "Mr. Jackman, I must admit I came into this hearing with certain preconceptions. I apologize if my initial tone suggested I had prejudged this matter." The courtroom fell silent. Judge "The Hammer" Harrison was not known for apologies. "Your Honor," Jackman responded graciously, "no apology necessary. I understand the skepticism. Celebrity involvement in causes can sometimes be superficial. I appreciate your willingness to hear our case on its merits." The judge nodded, then turned to the opposing counsel. "Mr. Thornton, I believe Mr. Jackman has raised serious questions about your client's motivations in this case. Do you have a response to the evidence suggesting this objection was filed in bad faith?" Thornton rose, his confidence visibly shaken. "Your Honor, my client maintains that the zoning issues are legitimate, regardless of any previous interest in the property." "And yet," Judge Harrison continued, "Mr. Jackman has effectively demonstrated that the project complies with current zoning regulations, particularly under the therapeutic use exception. Would you care to address that point specifically?" As Thornton struggled to formulate a response, Jackman remained composed, neither triumphant nor impatient. His demeanor reflected someone concerned only with the outcome for the children who would benefit from the facility, not with winning a legal battle or proving his own capabilities. The courtroom watched in fascination as the power dynamic continued to evolve. Judge Harrison, initially dismissive of the actor, was now treating him with the respect accorded to seasoned legal professionals. The opposing counsel, who had entered the courtroom with arrogant certainty, now appeared increasingly defensive. "Your Honor," Jackman said finally, We don't wish to impugn Mr. Thornton or his client unnecessarily. Our sole concern is moving forward with a project that will serve children facing life's greatest challenge. Every day of delay is a day these facilities remain unavailable to kids who need them. The simple, heartfelt statement resonated through the courtroom. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, the last of his skepticism giving way to genuine respect for the man standing before him. Not the movie star, but the advocate who had come extraordinarily prepared to fight for a cause he believed in. The afternoon session began with an unexpected development. As Judge Harrison called the court back to order, the doors opened to admit a group of children accompanied by medical staff. They filed quietly into the back rows of the gallery, some in wheelchairs, others walking slowly with IV poles beside them. Their presence transformed the atmosphere instantly. These weren't abstract beneficiaries, but real children whose lives would be impacted by the court's decision. Jackman acknowledged them with a gentle nod, but maintained his professional demeanor. He didn't exploit their presence for emotional effect, allowing the reality of their situation to speak for itself. Judge Harrison's gaze lingered on the children momentarily before returning to the matter at hand. "Before we continue," the judge announced, "I've reviewed the case law Mr. Jackman cited during our morning session. I must say, his interpretation of the therapeutic use exception is—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Surprisingly accurate." The gallery stirred at this unprecedented acknowledgement. Judge Harrison was known for finding fault with arguments presented by even the most seasoned attorneys. For him to validate Jackman's legal reasoning was extraordinary. However, the judge continued, addressing the opposing counsel, "Mr. Thornton has raised a procedural issue that warrants consideration. The Foundation's permit application appears to have bypassed the standard community input period. Mr. Jackman, how do you respond to this concern?" This was the moment where most celebrities would falter. The technical details of municipal permitting processes typically fall well outside their expertise. The opposing counsel looked confident for the first time since the morning session, clearly believing they had found Jackman's weak spot. Jackman exchanged a brief glance with Ms. Chen before rising. "Your Honor, I'm glad Mr. Thornton raised this point. It allows me to address a critical aspect of our application process." He approached the bench with a thick binder. "May I present Exhibit D?" The judge accepted the binder, his eyebrows rising slightly as he perused its contents. "What you're looking at, Your Honor, is complete documentation of our community engagement process," Jackman explained. "While it's true we utilized an accelerated review pathway, this was done under Section 8.7 of the Municipal Code, which specifically permits expedited processing for projects serving critically ill children." Jackman advanced to the projector again, displaying a calendar of events spanning the previous 6 months. "As you can see, we held 17 community meetings, 3 town halls, and conducted door-to-door outreach to every residence within a half-mile radius of the proposed site. We received written support from 89% of area residents, including signatures from the Neighborhood Association Board." The opposing counsel rose quickly. "Your Honor, we were not provided with this information during discovery." Jackman's attorney, Ms. Chen, spoke up. "Your Honor, all of this documentation was included in our initial disclosure package, page 47, items 103 through 120. The judge turned to his clerk. "Verify that, please." After a moment of checking files, the clerk nodded. "It's there, Your Honor. The community engagement documentation was provided in the initial disclosure." Mr. Thornton's face reddened. Judge Harrison's expression darkened as he addressed the opposing counsel. "Mr. Thornton, are you suggesting you failed to review the discovery materials thoroughly before bringing this action?" "No, Your Honor, of course not. We simply overlooked this particular section." "Overlooked," the judge repeated skeptically, "just as you overlooked the therapeutic use exception and the 2017 amendments." The momentum had shifted decisively. What had begun as a routine hearing with a celebrity expected to defer to legal professionals had become a masterclass in preparation and advocacy. Jackman wasn't just holding his own. He was systematically dismantling the opposition's case with a thoroughness that professional litigators would envy. One of the children in the back of the courtroom coughed softly, drawing attention momentarily to the real stakes of the legal proceedings. Jackman glanced back. his expression softening briefly before returning to the matter at hand. Your Honor, Jackman continued, there's another aspect of this case that I believe warrants the court's attention. He hesitated, exchanging a glance with Ms. Chen. This is delicate, but necessary for a complete understanding of the situation. The judge nodded. Proceed, Mr. Jackman. We've recently uncovered evidence suggesting that Westland Development's objection to our project may be motivated by more than zoning concerns. Jackman produced a sealed envelope. With the court's permission, I'd like to submit these documents under seal initially, as they contain sensitive information related to ongoing investigations. Judge Harrison accepted the envelope, his expression growing increasingly grave as he reviewed its contents. After several minutes of tense silence, he looked up, his gaze now fixed on Mr. Thornton with unmistakable severity. Mr. Thornton, are you aware of the contents of these documents? The attorney shifted uncomfortably. I cannot say with certainty what Mr. Jackman has provided to the court. Then allow me to enlighten you, Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. These appear to be communications between Westland Development and certain city officials, suggesting improper influence in the permitting process. There's also documentation of what looks suspiciously like an attempt to artificially inflate land values around the proposed facility site. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge continued, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review. Mr. Thornton, I strongly suggest you confer with your client immediately. The opposing counsel's composure crumbled entirely. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of... That will be determined in due course, Judge Harrison interrupted. For now, we'll focus on the matter before this court. He turned to Jackman with newfound respect. Mr. Jackman, it appears your foundation has done its due diligence in ways I wouldn't have anticipated. I commend your thoroughness. What happened next revealed the true nature of Hugh Jackman's involvement. Rather than press his advantage against the now floundering opposition, he redirected the court's attention to the children's facility itself. Your Honor, while these revelations are significant, they shouldn't overshadow the central purpose of our project, Jackman said, displaying new architectural renderings. Each element of this facility was designed with input from pediatric oncologists, child psychologists, and most importantly, the children themselves and their families. He walked the court through virtual renderings of sun-filled rooms overlooking healing gardens, spaces where medical treatment could occur in natural settings, and areas designed for families to stay comfortably with their children during treatment. This isn't just a building, Your Honor. For many of these children, it will be home during the most challenging months of their young lives. Our sole purpose is to make that time as healing and hopeful as possible. As Jackman spoke, even the court reporter paused occasionally, moved by the evident sincerity in his voice. This wasn't celebrity philanthropy as a public relations exercise. It was deeply personal commitment backed by extraordinary preparation. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose thoughtfully. When he looked up, his expression had transformed completely from the dismissive judge who had opened proceedings that morning. Mr. Jackman, he said finally, I believe I owe you an apology. It's clear to me now that your involvement in this project goes far beyond lending your name to a worthy cause. You've demonstrated a level of commitment and preparation that puts many professional advocates to shame. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison prepared to deliver his ruling. The morning's contentious atmosphere had given way to something more profound, a shared recognition of what was truly at stake. The children seated in the back rows watched attentively, their young faces bearing the unmistakable marks of difficult treatments and courageous battles. Hugh Jackman sat beside Ms. Chen, his posture straight but relaxed, the picture of quiet confidence tempered with appropriate humility. Before I render my decision, Judge Harrison began, I want to address something unusual about these proceedings. He removed his glasses, a gesture that humanized the stern jurist. In my 30 years on the bench, I've developed certain presumptions about celebrity involvement in charitable causes. I assumed such involvement was typically superficial, names lent to fundraising efforts while the real work happened elsewhere. The judge looked directly at Jackman. Mr. Jackman has thoroughly disproven that assumption today. His command of complex legal principles, municipal regulations, and the nuanced requirements of pediatric care facilities demonstrates an extraordinary level of personal investment. Judge Harrison replaced his glasses and lifted the stack of documents before him. Having reviewed all evidence presented, I am prepared to rule on the matter of Westland Development Corporation versus the Laughing Kookaburra Foundation. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone leaned forward slightly. I hereby dissolve the temporary cease and desist order. The Laughing Kookaburra Foundation's project is found to be in full compliance with all relevant zoning regulations under the therapeutic use exception of Boston Municipal Code. Construction may resume immediately. A soft wave of relief passed through the gallery. One of the younger children clapped briefly before being gently hushed by a nurse. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, I am referring the matter of Westland Development's conduct to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential ethics violations and abuse of the legal process. Mr. Thornton, the opposing counsel, stared at his hands, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Finally, Judge Harrison concluded, I'm taking the unusual step of awarding expedited permitting status to the Foundation's project under the critical needs provision of the Municipal Code. Simply put, these children shouldn't have to wait a day longer than necessary for this facility. The judge banged his gavel, officially ending the proceedings. Court is adjourned. As people began to rise, Judge Harrison added informally, Mr. Jackman, would you mind approaching the bench? Jackman nodded to Ms. Chen and walked forward. The judge stepped down to speak with him more privately. Off the record, Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying only to those nearest, I want to apologize personally for my conduct at the beginning of today's hearing. My preconceptions were not just incorrect, but unprofessional. Jackman shook his head. No apology necessary, Your Honor. First impressions work both ways. I've certainly been misjudged based on my profession before. May I ask you something? The judge inquired. With your level of legal knowledge, you could have easily hired the most prestigious law firm in Boston to handle this. Why take such a personal role in the proceedings? Jackman glanced back at the children preparing to leave. When I started this foundation, after losing my friend to cancer, I made a promise, not just to donate money or lend my name, but to be personally involved in every aspect. These kids deserve nothing less than our complete commitment. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Well, Mr. Jackman, you've earned my respect today, not as an actor, but as an advocate. He extended his hand, which Jackman shook firmly. As the courtroom cleared, reporters gathered outside, eager for statements. Jackman spoke briefly, deflecting attention from his own performance to focus on the children who would benefit from the facility. He explained the innovative design elements, how natural light would flood treatment rooms, how healing gardens would provide spaces for recovery, how family accommodations would ensure no child faced treatment alone. Today wasn't about legal arguments, he told the assembled press. It was about ensuring these brave kids get every advantage in their fight. Each day of delay meant another day without the best possible care environment. A reporter called out, Mr. Jackman, where did you learn so much about property law and zoning regulations? Jackman smiled. The same way I prepare for any important role, complete immersion. For the past year, I've been studying with legal experts, municipal planners, and healthcare specialists. When something matters this much, you do the work. Another reporter pressed. Judge Harrison is known as the Hammer for his tough courtroom demeanor. Were you intimidated? Not at all, Jackman replied thoughtfully. In my experience, people who project toughness often do so from a place of principle. Judge Harrison wasn't being difficult. He was ensuring the law was properly applied. Once he saw the merits of our case, he ruled accordingly. This gracious response, refusing to criticize the judge who had initially dismissed him, only enhanced the public's perception of the actor's character. By evening, the story had gone viral, with legal blogs particularly impressed by Jackman's unexpected expertise. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, the Laughing Kookaburra Foundation's Boston facility opened its doors. The elegant building, with its walls of windows overlooking meticulously designed healing gardens, welcomed its first young patients. Judge William Harrison was among the attendees at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, standing quietly at the back of the crowd. When Jackman spotted him, He made his way through the gathering to greet the judge personally. "Your Honor, I'm glad you could make it." "I wouldn't have missed it," Judge Harrison replied, surveying the facility with evident approval. "Remarkable what can be accomplished when the right people champion the right causes." Together they toured the completed facility, the light-filled treatment rooms, the family accommodation suites, the indoor gardens where children could connect with nature regardless of weather or season. Medical staff explained how the innovative design would support their work, potentially improving recovery outcomes by significant margins. At the central garden, they paused beside a small stone marker. Inscribed on it was a simple dedication. "For Michael, who taught us that healing happens in many ways, and for all the children who will find strength here." Judge Harrison read the inscription silently. "Your friend?" he asked. Jackman nodded. "He always said hospitals should have more windows and gardens. He was right." As they continued walking, a young patient approached Jackman with a shy smile and a drawing to sign. The actor knelt down to the child's level, giving him his complete attention as though he were the only person there. Judge Harrison watched the interaction, then spoke quietly to Ms. Chen, who had organized the opening ceremony. "You know, when he first walked into my courtroom, I saw only the celebrity. I completely missed the man." "Many people make that mistake," she replied, "but not twice." In the years that followed, the Boston facility became a model for pediatric care environments nationwide. What began as a contentious legal battle had transformed into a legacy that would benefit thousands of children. And it all started with a judge who laughed at an actor in his courtroom and the unexpected legal brilliance that changed everything.